Hello and welcome back to 10RC. Today we're starting the build of the LD3 D. This is the Schumacher tool drive dirt car. So we're starting off building up the front shocks here. We got the MR33 grease, O-ring grease, which I've already put on the O-rings already. I've started on one shock already, so I'm ready to start the next one. So what I'm going to start off with is getting the piston on the shock shaft. So first of all, we get the new screw, and got a bit of tissue here, a bit of brake cleaner on there, and clean the threads up. Always do this with anything to do with thread lock, because look at that, that's all the grease that was already on the screw, so you don't want that on there. So first of all, I'm going to grab my piston. I'm using a machine piston, not the kit ones. The kit ones are okay, but they may need a bit of filing. So I'll put my piston on the screw, and then my shock washer with the recess facing down, and then a bit of thread lock, just a little bit on there. If you get too much, wipe off the excess with your tissue. And that's okay, maybe a tad too much, so I'll just dab that on there, give it a twist around, get the excess off. So that's got enough on there to do its job. Then I'll grab my shock shaft and screw it on, and then I'll nip it up using the shock pliers. Okay, this is how I build my shocks. People do it differently, but so that's my first part done. Then whilst that's sitting there, I'll grab my shock body. I've got my two O-rings, I've already coated them in grease, so I'll put one in. I like to use the grease to give the O-rings a bit more life. Now that is slipped in nice and easily. If that was tight, you need to trim off any flashing left from the moulding process. Right, so they're in, plenty of grease, we can always wipe off the excess. Then we want the little white top hat. Probably could have done that actually. Get rid of that. I'll put the O-ring on first, because that'll get in the way. The grease will look after the O-ring as well. Not sure where this is on camera, but yeah, just using your fingers like that, work your way down, and then push the O-ring down. So that's sort of almost there, and then when you wind it on, that will seat it down. Then you put this little hat on there, screw that down a few turns, not all the way, because you don't want it to be wound all the way in until the shock shaft is in place. A little bit of O-ring grease on the end of the shock shaft so it doesn't damage the O-rings when you push it through, and then don't ram it through, just wiggle it gently until it comes through the other side. Then you can wind that on there, and that's all good to go, and you can clean up the excess off the threads there. So the O-rings are in, protected by the grease, and you've got a bit of extra grease on the thread, which helps when you're threading on the eyelet on the end of the shock. Right, so that's the next thing I want to do. So I want to get my shock pliers again, and I'll pop them in there, the ball into the end of the shock eyelet. Hopefully that will fit in there, and you can just give it a little squeeze and it pops in, ready to go. So next thing I'm going to do is put that on. Now if you've got some vernier calipers, that would be handy, because then you can measure your shock stroke, but generally you can do all that sort of thing when you get to you know, when you fill it up with oil, which we're not doing right now because I want to let that thread lock set. So I like to put a driver through. This 1.5 driver fits nicely through there, and you can wind it through. Because it's new, it'll be a bit tighter. Make sure you hold it firmly with your shock pliers. I'll just wind it down, so I've got about, yeah, pretty much all of the threads have disappeared. You don't want to keep winding it on there. But, yeah, that's on right down to the end of the threads, and you got a nice movement. That is the thread locks in there, so that can be sitting there curing, which you don't want to be filling that up with oil just yet. So whilst that's doing that, let's move on to the shock caps. These one piece guys here. Now I've got a drill with a 1.7mm drill bit in it. So all you've got to really trying to do is you're going to go through the hole just to open up the hole there so the oil can flow through. So just give it a little tweak, nice and slow, and then it just pops through. Back it out, and then that's all it needs. All it needs just to do its job. At this point here, all you got to do is get your O-ring, which drops into the cap here. Give that a little push. That is good to go. Right, so you're ready. That's for later on. And then you'll need the shock sort of collar part here, which winds on for your spring. This is where the bigger O-ring slips inside here. So you kind of fold it in, tuck it in, work your way around, give it a little push, and it should just pop in. It's really easy. And then from the bottom, you slide it up like this and give it a few winds. Get that wound up. So that will be ready for oil pretty much from now, but I won't be doing this just yet. So yeah, there we go. That's the first stage basically completed on this shock. I would finish the process on that one using 1.7 by 2 hole piston. Feels good. And then later on, when we put the rest of the shock together in the oil, we'll bleed it and we'll put the bleeder screws in and so on. This comes with a high response black spring with a little black sleeve here. Some people don't use the sleeves, but I do, even though it's black, just to make sure you don't get confused with anything else. I just like to put a driver in there, slip it on, and push it round. And you can then get a lighter or something just to make the heat shrink down a little bit so it holds in position. Yeah, so that is this stage complete. Right, yeah, moving on, I'll complete that one, do the rears. The rears are basically the same, and then we can move on to the diff, I believe, is next after that. So I'm just moving on to the rear shocks here. So this is the moulding. I'm just going to trim these bits out. So I'm using these MR33 little trimmers. These are very sharp, really handy. So you want to get as close as you can to the moulding and just trim that off. You do not want any of this excess material on the plastic. If it doesn't go in smoothly, you'll need to trim them up even more. So that's just a little thing I wanted to go through.